Hi, I'll make this as quick as possible because as you'll be aware by now, more than you've ever been aware, I'm really interested in speed. So firstly, I want to thank you for the way that you participated in both the boot camp and the EMC. You know, if it hadn't occurred to you before, I think it's a big ask to bet that you can get nearly 100 people staring at a counter for an hour or sitting in a darkened room chanting OM when they've never even heard the process before. So I'm feeling pretty chuffed about that, and like I said, I want to convey my thanks to you for trusting me enough to have a go. Secondly, I also want to thank you for your support of the process when we built get stuffed for Alexi in that 26 hours. As you know, I've always wanted to do that for years, and to see you all embrace a concept and have a go was pretty encouraging for a bloke who was stepping out onto some pretty thin ice at the time. Obviously, it was an overwhelming success from the construction point of view. It'll take us a bit of time to see whether it translates into dollars in the bank, which is the only thing that counts. So really the big game starts now. Getting the Get Stuffed message out there in front of enough interested people will be the task from here on in, and it'll be fabulous to see what happens whichever way it goes. So stay tuned for that. The third reason for me chatting with you today is that Gavin came to me after we'd finished the gig and pointed out that I hadn't shared my own personal perspectives and learnings, and he'd have loved to have heard that before we finished, what I'd gained from the experience during the process. So I'd like to do that now. So what an oversight, and thanks for pointing it out, Gavin. So here's my personal journey for what it's worth. Like many of you, I tend to be almost totally unaware of my own progress as I'm inching towards my goals in life. And I guess that's because, you know, we'd like our movement towards our goals to be much faster than it ever is. Anyway, I spent years musing about what we just did in that 26 hours, and basically telling myself that it ought to be possible, and listening to the doubters, many of whom, by the way, had very good arguments to put to me. So there was always a reason why I shouldn't push it now. I'm sure you know the things I mean. You know, they turn out to be made of paper when you lean on them, but they look like, you know, brick walls when you're a little bit away from them. So I don't want to sound like I'm hammering on an old theme, but the key for me turned out to be committing to the process. There was an instant where I made the decision to go for it, and after that it was all down to managing the process. Left to my own devices, I would undoubtedly have crashed and burned in the first couple of hours. Now the reason behind that is I just think things can be done because I don't know any better. A classic example of that was buying a domain. The kids listened to what I had to say and then told me that it takes 48 hours to get the servers to point at the domain name. Therefore, you can't load anything onto your brand new website for 2 days, which would have just blown the whole thing. But I told Helen what we're going to do, and she'd gone off to arrange the rest of the gig around all of that, so we just had to find a way. Well, as you know, we ended up doing that part ahead of time when I'd have preferred to have done it from scratch within the room, but impossible. So we had to find a way. And that's my big learning. Even though I've been teaching the concept for years, it was turning out to be my version of do in order to learn activity. The 26-hour success has had a bittersweet taste for me personally. See, it was supposed to go like that. So at one level, it's hard to get excited about something that went according to plan, because after all, it was meant to go exactly the way that it did. On the other hand, I'm elated. My world changed because some self-doubt's been put to bed and some faith in my own thinking has been built up. Two pretty cool things when you think about it, I guess. Ultimately, the project is not the biggie for me though. When I look at it, I'd have been okay if we'd have crashed and burned. I'd have turned that into the lesson and figured out a way to recover and get back on track. In fact, I had 2 individuals come to me and say that they were hoping for the whole thing to crash and burn so that they could see what I came up with and how I handled it. And I guess that's fair enough, you know. We kind of go to the finals of the footy to see the best up against each other because, you know, the titanic struggle will bring the most out of them and their team, and we'll see some inspirational footy, or tennis, or whatever we're watching. So I get it, but I'd also like to say that crash and burn was never actually going to happen. I don't know how, but I would have found a way around the obstacles. Perhaps that's just about commitment again. So obviously, I'm relieved. I'm in awe of the team who did the real work and contemplating what it means to have been able to pull a team like that together and to keep them. And to keep them challenged enough to keep going while making sure they feel supported enough and for them to want to take the risk themselves. And trust me, all of them were on their own personal cliff edge during that process. So to a person, they accepted the challenge and embraced the possibility of being the weak link in the chain. That they wanted to be a part of it with all of its attendant risk is what's actually stretching my mind the most. It's undoubtedly my most treasured learning from the whole process. Thanks seems like such a small thing to say, but it comes from a very deep place within me. That's it from me.